Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the 2022 Annenberg Art Gala. We are so excited that you have made time to be here. I know everyone is so busy, so we really appreciate it. Please note, we invite you to put your view in speaker mode so you can see everything that we prepared for you today. I'm Michelle Tong, and I'm a rising fourth-year medical student. One of my hats at the school is running and editing The Apothecary with many of my classmates, which is a creative arts magazine at Mount Sinai. We're actually currently looking for new leadership, so please reach out if you're interested in joining. To set the groundwork for today, the Annenberg Art Competition happens every 2 years and is open to all medical students and trainees, including residents and fellows at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai. And it opens a space for student artists to share their vision and enhance the learning environment at the school. The winning pieces that you will see today are actually framed and hung on the 12th and 13th floors of Annenberg. And this year, we're actually expanding the installation to Aaron Hall and even a virtual gallery that we'll share with you shortly. We have an incredible program for you today that would not be possible without the support of folks who we'd like to acknowledge. First, a huge thank you goes to the Leni and Peter W. May Department of Medical Education at Mount Sinai, affectionately known to many of us as MedEd, who is sponsoring today's opening gala and programming. Also, a huge thank you to the trainee artists who participated by submitting their work with us. You are all so phenomenal. I've seen the art, it's amazing. And a special thanks to Dino Kainola from the Mount Sinai Engineering Department, who did a fantastic job in hanging all of the physical pieces in this year's gallery. They are heavy, so thank you. And last but not least, a huge thank you to the 2022 Annenberg Art Committee, namely Melissa Best, Samantha Amazon, Aaliyah Barnes, Gwen Cassiano, Jay Johnson, Alexander Joseph, and Tara Jefferson, who not only selected this year's phenomenal pieces, but also themed and curated the selection and organized today's event. So a huge thank you, and can we please get a virtual applause on the screen for the amazing teams? I know they put in so much work, and I'm so lucky to be surrounded by all of them. So press your reaction button for applause or confetti. We'd love to see the love in the chat as well. And now, reactions aside, it's our pleasure to kick off our virtual gallery today by introducing Dr. Bobbi Coller. Dr. Bobbi Coller is an art historian, independent curator, and art educator. She has curated over 30 exhibitions, including The Artist's Mother, Portraits and Homages, which was shown at the National Portrait Gallery in Washington, D.C. In addition to curating, Bobbi chairs the advisory board of the Paulette Krasner House and Study Center in Springs, New York, and is on the education committee of the Solomon R. Guggenheim Museum. She's a member of the New York Academy of Medicine and a proud member of the planning committee of the Academy for Medicine and the Humanities at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai. Together with her husband, Dr. Barry Coller, she created and co-teaches a course for medical students and health professionals at the Icahn School of Medicine entitled The Pulse of Art, Connections Between the History of Art and the History of Medicine. Today, she is here to lay the groundwork of our event and will discuss the interplay and the importance of arts, medicine, and the humanities. Dr. Coller, you now have our attention.
Thank you so much, Michelle. I am absolutely delighted to be here today, and I really thank you for inviting me to participate in this wonderful art exhibition created by medical students, residents, and fellows. I want to thank Samantha Amazon, Melissa Best, Michelle Tong, Aaliyah Barnes, Jay Johnson, Alexander Joseph, and this wonderful team that was able to put together such a wonderful exhibition. I hope you heard me because I said that I am just thrilled to be here And I also want to give heartfelt congratulations to the artists who I will speak about later. You know, we are all experts in visual art. Perhaps more than at any previous time in history, we are surrounded by images. As medical students, doctors, nurses, and healthcare professionals, your world is filled with particular kinds of images. Could I have the first slide, please? Okay, so if you look on the left of the slide, this is what I'm going to be talking about. Within seconds, you are adept at reading diagrams of the human body, graphs that indicate changes and comparative information, pie charts to visualize percentages, and scientific articles filled with written and mapped information. Next slide, please. This slide shows a typical fever chart for a patient with typhoid fever. With clear directional lines, it gives important information about the course of the illness and the patient's condition over time. Next, please. Okay. And on the left over here, you see that it is a slide that also gives important information about fever. Insight into the way someone looks and acts by overcome by such a high fever that it causes delirium. The painting is by the brilliant Spanish artist Francisco Goya and is entitled Self-Portrait with Dr. Arrieta. Dedicated to his physician and created after he recovered, Goya captures the pallor and weakness of an ill man. Next, please. Could I have the next slide, please? Thank you. Notice the gray tinged complexion of the artist's face, positioned for comparison near the doctor's rosy complexion. The limpness of his body as his head sways back, and the way his hand reaches for the bedsheet. These details telegraph a sense of nocturnal misery. This painting documents the severe illness Goya survived and is also an unusual self-portrait. Whereas most artists want to represent themselves in a flattering way, Goya chose to depict himself at a time of confusion and vulnerability. Could we go back to the previous slide? Thank you. Goya also included an unusual addition to the image in the form of a written dedication at the bottom of the canvas. And I hope you can see it. It's writing, but it's actually part of the painting. It reads, Goya, in gratitude to his friend Arrieta for the compassion and care with which he saved his life during the acute and dangerous illness he suffered toward the end of the year 1819 in his 73rd year. So this is not only a remarkable painting, it's also a remarkable thank you note. Could we have the next slide? Thank you. Scientific articles like the one on the screen that followed patients with tuberculosis living in Harlem in 1975 highlight higher concentrations of the illness in underserved neighborhoods and offer a picture of the persistence of a long-standing and highly communicable disease. Next, please. Okay. The artist Alice Neal witnessed the effects of tuberculosis in Harlem when she lived there in 1940. She gives us rich visual information in her painting, TB Harlem. It is a portrait of a young Puerto Rican man, Carlos, who rests on purple bedding, the rich color framing his long neck and emaciated body. Carlos gestures to the large, bright bandage covering the place where doctors removed ribs, asymmetrically hollowing out one side of his body. His resigned expression, obvious wound, and reclining position evoke images of saints and martyrdom. Neal wanted to record his suffering. Years later, she gave more information about the course of his illness, writing, "This young Puerto Rican, who was 24 at the time, had tuberculosis. In those days, they collapsed a lung. Today, they give you an injection to dry it up, but in 1940, they removed 11 ribs." In the painting, He had just returned from the hospital, but would soon go back. What a crucifixion he went through. The next painting, please. Paintings can also serve as documents that record the practice of medicine. This work by André Bruyère from 1887, entitled A Clinical Lesson at the Salpêtrière, captures the sensational public sessions where Dr. Jean-Martin Charcot demonstrated hysteria with the young women who were housed in the hospital. In 1882, 20% of the women in the hospital had been diagnosed as hysterics. The illness became associated with a characteristic body position featuring an arched back. In the painting, you can see the young female patient swooning in front of the assembled physicians and guests. On the wall, on the far left side of the room, there is a drawing of a woman in the throes of a hysterical reaction, her midsection thrust up from the bed. The next slide, please. This is the image on the far wall of the painting, the image of female hysteria that became a familiar trope in the late 19th century. Next work, thank you. For many years, the contemporary French artist Louise Bourgeois was absorbed with the history of mental illness and psychiatry. In 1993, she created Arch of Hysteria, a dramatic bronze sculpture suspended from the ceiling by a wire. As viewers look at it, it gradually shifts in space, revealing the exaggerated contortion of an androgynous body. Next. Thank you. The work viscerally conveys the pain of mental illness and, with its lack of gender identification, denies the long-standing linkage of hysteria with women. We have just seen, could you go back, please? Thank you. We have just seen 3 sets of paired slides highlighting high fever and illness, the prevalence of tuberculosis in a diverse community, and the historical association between hysteria and women. All provide valuable information. And now I would like to ask you a question. What does the art offer that is not found in the diagrams or scientific articles? Given more time, we could propose many things, but the short answer is humanity. Art requires us to engage with a range of human emotions and responses, including fear, uncertainty, bravery, strength, ambivalence, grief, elation, despair, and triumph. The arts help us connect with the lived experience of wellness and disease. The Icahn School of Medicine has been at the forefront of promoting humanistic, self-reflective medical practice. The Academy for Medicine and the Humanities was established in 2012 under the leadership of Dr. Suzanne Garfinkel, and she currently co-leads it with Dr. Jacob Appel. The Academy offers a variety of courses through the Nexus program, as well as opportunities for students to engage in research, teaching, and leadership. It also sponsors the Richmond Udell Lectures given yearly by distinguished visiting professors and artists. This year's theme was Yes and Navigating Uncertainty in Medicine and Life. I hope you had the opportunity to hear Diane Brown, founder of the extraordinary nonprofit organization RX Art, discuss how she works with renowned contemporary artists to transform pediatric spaces, and to hear the Yale University philosophy professor, L.A. Paul, analyze and question the daunting process of making life-altering decisions through rational reasoning. I was fortunate to learn about or participate in 4 courses this year: a multidisciplinary exploration of significant mental conditions as portrayed in film, art, and literature, taught by Charlotte Pierce. The Art of Listening, a course centered on the power of music and the importance of listening to the voices of patients as they reveal their own stories, organized by Amber Wood and Christine Lopez. And a close reading of Mary Shelley's classic and still relevant book, Frankenstein, taught by Dr. James Curley Egan. They were all wonderful. Next slide, please. In addition, my husband, Dr. Bobbi Coller, and I were able to resume in person our semester-long course, The Pulse of Art, in which we use the power of art to enhance observation, promote empathy, acknowledge ambiguity, and illuminate the history of medicine. I invite all of you to join us in the fall and to check out the website, thepulseofart.org. You were also invited to attend Academy forums held on Thursdays from noon to 1 o'clock. Students are welcome to explore ideas for research projects or to create new courses under the guidance of Drs. Garfinkel and Appel. Today, we are here to discover new art and to celebrate the artists of Mount Sinai. They are students, residents, and fellows. In addition to studying, attending, and treating patients, they make space to create unique and personal works of art. Their drawings, paintings, and photographs will remain on the walls of Mount Sinai for some time, offering all who pass through the halls a reminder of the universal bond of shared humanity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Coller, for that insightful talk and imparting your knowledge and wisdom on us. I really loved your piece about the role of art in reminding us of our humanity and reflecting. Just wonderful all around. So at this time, we're actually going to open up the Q&A section for the audience. You can raise your virtual hand, or if you don't feel comfortable speaking in front of the audience, you can feel free to submit your questions through slido.com using the code #art2022, and I'll read those questions for you. So we're just going to take a few moments to reflect on what Dr. Coller just shared with us. And feel free to unmute if you have questions.
I have a question, Michelle. First of all, it's great to see you. Dr. Coller, it's great to see you again, too. Thank you always for your generosity of spirit and energy and time and support. I have a question for you in this kind of new going into post-COVID space. How do you see us as a medical school doing a deeper dive in the arts and allowing space for expression, not just learning and thinking about art, but having ways for students to express themselves in a formal environment in the curriculum? For example, we're getting ready to go through a real transformation in our curricular environment. And I'm wondering if this could be a wonderful opportunity for us to embed expression, creative expression in a really revolutionary way that we have not thought about in the past. Do you have any thoughts on that? I know you've been adjacent to medicine for your entire, at least family life for sure. Yeah, so I wondered if you have thoughts on that.
Michelle, I love that you're thinking about this and that you are giving it serious consideration, which means giving time to this, because I know everyone is so full in their schedule with learning information and very important medical things. But as I said today, this is another essential part of being a healer. And I would love to see you do that. I would love to work with you. I'm involved with the Guggenheim Museum, and they would love to partner with Mount Sinai. I think it's a wonderful experience to be in front of art and to not just look at it and be told about it, but to actually start to react to it and to do activities. But there are so many ways. I mean, I'm used to doing that with our class in terms of museum settings, but there are a lot of other ways that people can participate and not just listen, but also act and do activities and write about things that they see. And it's a great way to reflect and to get to a kind of a deeper sense of where you are and what you want to think about. So I'd be happy to continue this with you because I think that there are many possibilities and we can talk about some of them.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you again, Dr. Koller. We'll keep the Slido open in case anyone wants to submit more questions, and we'll let you know if anyone gets questions, and we'll send those to you. But at this time, we're actually going to move. Oh, yes, of course. At this time, we're going to move on to the student portion of the presentation. I'll give a brief introduction about the art gallery. So this year's installation is aptly themed Between the World and Me. The 2022 selection transcends personal perspectives and is an invitation to peer into worlds beyond our own. Let's see how, beginning with our first guest artist, Benji Kornbluth. Benji Kornbluth describes himself as an avid pickup basketball player, longtime Suffering Knicks fans, semi-professional drummer, NYC bagel pizza enthusiast, and a fourth-year medical student who is looking forward to beginning his emergency medicine residency. Through his photographs, he attempts to capture a brief moment of the people, places, and peculiarities he experiences. Today, he goes behind the scenes with his winning piece, The Global Language of Basketball. Let's watch.
Hi, my name is Benji Kornbluth. I'm a fourth-year med student here at Sinai. This is my photograph, The Global Language of Basketball, taken on a warm July evening in Korle-Bu Teaching Hospital in Accra, Ghana. For me, basketball was always so much more than just a game or a sport or a way for me to kind of clear my head at the end of a day. It really has become an avenue for me to connect with people regardless of who they are, where they come from, how they may identify. And I think there are so many parallels with medicine being this global language where communication and teamwork are really paramount. Here at Sinai, I mean, we're so lucky to have such a thriving basketball culture right outside this building, Aaron Hall, where every day, weather permitting, you have students from all classes, you have residents, you have attendings who are out there sharing the court. But I think even more importantly is that they're sharing these ideas, they're sharing these experiences, and they're sharing this amazing mentorship that goes on during and in between the games. And when I got to Korle-Bu, when I got to Accra to do some research over the summer, that was really one of the first things I really wanted to seek out was, is there a basketball court? Are there people playing basketball every day? And I was pleasantly surprised to find on my first day there that just like here outside of Aaron Hall here at Sinai, that the students, the residents, and the attendings were again sharing that court, sharing those ideals, sharing those experiences. And I really wanted to capture that in this sort of dynamic photo, but I didn't want it to be any one individual. I really wanted it to be this silhouette of everybody moving in motion together, where the viewer really kind of just can imagine and can see, this could be Accra, this could be Ghana, but this could also be your backyard. This could be a playground in the city. It could be really anywhere you can imagine. And I hope as you pass it here in the hallways on the way to the gym and on the way to the courts, that kind of transports you back to a time where you had some fun and were able to enjoy some free time with some friends and family. It's really been, I mean, my passion as, I guess, a future that I just found out, emergency medicine resident, has been always to kind of be able to treat and care for everybody regardless of who they are, where they come from. And I always wanted medicine and global health to be a conduit for me to be able to travel, to be able to learn about new cultures, new peoples, new traditions. And this was an example where Sinai gave me the opportunity to go to a new location, to learn about a new culture and new people, and really be able to have an amazing experience. So my real inspirations are my mom and my older brother, who are both amazing photographers. And being able to capture these moments is something that's always been so important to me, that I've seen through their works. And I know if I can ever even just have a shred of what they've been able to accomplish and capture, even if it's not the greatest photograph in the world, but just knowing that I have those moments to be able to have for myself and just to be able to kind of share with others is something that's really exciting and important to me.
Thank you, Benji. He's actually hiking in Patagonia right now, so we could all wish him a safe trip in our minds. He'll feel the love. So to see how immersed you were in his world, we actually have a surprise poll on the screen with a trivia question related to the video you just watched. So I'm going to launch that right now and give folks 30 seconds to answer the poll. The choices, the question is, for those listening, who are Benji's biggest photography influences in his life? A, National Geographic photos. B, his mom and his brother. C, his fellow colleagues. End the poll early because it seems like everyone's getting this right. If you answered B, his mom and his brother, you are correct. Shout out to all the moms and brothers out there. I think my mom is in the audience just watching me, so shout out to my mom too. Next up, we have another guest artist, Iya Prytkova. Iya is a PhD candidate in neuroscience and a lifelong creative spirit. As a Russian American, she is no stranger to living in two worlds. She embraces the duality of being both a scientist and an artist, using both disciplines to explore the building blocks of our subjective experience. Iya, you have our attention.
Hi, my name is Iya Prytkova, and I am a PhD student in neuroscience, and today I will be talking to you about my artwork, The Moon. So The Moon is part of the Tarot Deck oil painting series, and I often get the question, like, you're a scientist, why are you into tarot cards and all of that mysticism? For me, it is about using them as a tool for self-attunement, a sort of mental health diagnostic. The cards have a range of interpretations and possibilities, and the ones that our minds gravitate towards is in itself very informative. This particular piece arose at a particularly tumultuous time, months into the first round of quarantine, like its namesake, it represents a lot of tumult and dualities and things that we cannot quite reconcile within ourselves. So this piece is actually unique among my others because it did not come forth on an empty canvas. It actually is carved through a piece that has already existed. The appearance of the moon card allowed me to reinvent it, to carve a window through that kind of like mental headscape and fill it with a different sort of light. So with this series of paintings, I use still lifes to reinterpret the card, and each object is a memory. It symbolizes a connection. And the most personal part for me is perhaps the least objective. It is the interplay of the warm and cold light that I use, the cold contrast of the moon and the warmth of the candle, representing the conscious, subconscious kind of playing against each other and ultimately spilling into the more real world. Figuratively as well as literally portrayed through the water spilling here. Water in itself is another recurring element for me, representing the flow of thought and emotion and just kind of an untethered, inconcrete state of mind. As far, I guess, as my process and in general the importance of art in my life as someone who also, is a scientist, I will say that it provides a very important complement to my pursuit of understanding the mind. As a neuroscientist, I am very much into the concrete, molecular, and cellular mechanisms. But as we all know, our personal day-to-day subjective experience tends to be pretty far removed from the things that we see published in papers or textbooks. So that just allows me to have a multi-pronged approach at addressing the same question of what is going on inside our heads.
Thank you so much, Iya. I felt just looking at that piece, I felt transcended to another place, and that speaks wonders to your art. So thank you so much. I'm definitely going to be reading my tarot cards today. So if you can predict, we actually have another trivia question. So I'm going to launch that right now and give folks some time to answer that. And for those listening in, the question is, what's one of the personal items in the moon that meant the most to Iya? A, the candle, B, the waterfall, and C, the tarot cards. Seems like we have answers for all of them right now, but the candle is winning, and that is the correct answer. So if you answered the candle, feel free to put some heart emojis out there. Honor code, no lying. So put your heart emojis. And now we are going to move on to the next artist, Minhaz Sarker. Minhaz is a landscape photographer originally based out of the Pacific Northwest. Having grown up there, he loves sharing the beauty of his home through his photography. With every photograph, he aims to showcase a unique perspective on our world. Let's watch.
So my name is Minhaz Sarker. I'm actually a third-year obstetrics and gynecology resident here. Growing up in Oregon, we're surrounded by so much natural beauty. If you're not familiar with it, within the valley specifically, you're 50 miles from mountains, 50 miles from the ocean, 50 miles from lots of forestry and waterfalls, and it's just an absolute playground for any sort of hiking enthusiast or landscape photographer. And when a photo of mine is put on the wall somewhere or someone's purchasing it for their home, it brings me joy to know that I've brought that person a little slice of my home to them. This image, we were just talking about it for a second here. It's on the Oregon coast, and one of the things that's amazing about this spot, if you will take a look at the imaging, it's Thor's Well. In essence, it is a well. During high tide, the ocean will roll in. If there's actually an opening, there's a well spot, and it actually opens out into the ocean. And so when the wave comes in, it fills up that hole. The well starts welling up, and then it'll overflow over, and then it'll suck back in. And one of the things that's interesting is when the water actually recedes, that's one of the best times to try to make an image out of it, because you get that silky smooth, the lines of the water receding through that well. And one of the interesting things about this is, while some may look at this and think of it as a beautiful piece of photography, it's beautiful imagery, anyone who's from Oregon and has been to this spot and has tried to photograph it will tell you how difficult it is to get a photograph like this, because you have to be there during high tide, you have to be there when the conditions are safe. If you know anything about Oregon, you know that it rains a lot, so the weather has to be in your favor. And then on top of all of that, the ocean is unpredictable. That is to say two factors. One is the sunset. Getting pretty colors on the horizon is not something that's guaranteed, in the sense that we have a lot of overcast situations. We have a lot of ocean mist that comes through where you may never see the sun for a few days on end, just because of the weather conditions that are there. And then the second thing being that when I mentioned that water comes up, it covers the whole area and it recedes through. For the most part, it's something that's beautiful to behold from a distance. In this image and something like this, often photographers 10 to 15 feet away from the edge of that well, if you will. And so when it fills up, it's actually covering our feet, it's covering our tripods. When it's receding through, you have to be very careful, because if a wave comes through that's stronger than the others, something called a sneaker wave, all of a sudden that can topple your tripod, it can damage your camera, and most importantly, it can hurt you and cause physical harm. Photographers have gotten injured in the past. It's not something that obviously is the highlight of this place, but when it really comes down to it, the reason for me bringing it up is it's something that when I look at, I connect to this image significantly. When I first came out here, there was a time when I wasn't as well versed in understanding the ocean. I actually was one of the individuals that had a tripod that toppled over, a camera that ended up breaking, and it was mostly because I left my tripod there to go look at another scene to help another individual. So it's not something that it's something that I personally connect to, and the imagery is beautiful as well. So while I want you to appreciate the imagery, I also want you to understand that when we go out to these places as photographers, we do sometimes put ourselves at risk, sometimes unknowingly, but we do so because we really enjoy and have a passion for our craft. So, I appreciate you still staying logged on and listening to me talk about this. I call this piece Sanctuary. The reason for the name of the sanctuary, if you look at the image, you can see that there's a tree shrouded in fog, which we'll talk about in a second, and you can see some livestock and some cattle down there. And the trees for a lot of animals in heavy fog does serve as a pseudo sanctuary. It gives them a bearing for where they are in the field. They have an idea of this is that tree, this is that location that I'm in overall. But for me, the reason that this is listed as sanctuary is this tree is something that is another one that's near and dear to my heart. It's actually a few miles from my parents' home. It's the city I grew up in. It's 45,000 people when I was growing up, 20,000 of which were college students. So really when it came down to my lifestyle, it was a very, very small place. But this tree is one that I saw going in and out to get to Interstate 5, which is the interstate that runs up and down and gets us to most everywhere that we need to go. We drive right by this tree. So I saw it growing up multiple times a week. And so for me, this is sanctuary because this image reminds me of home. Right now I'm about 3,000 miles from my parents, and 3,000 miles from my family, and 3,000 miles from anything that I find comforting and know. And so when I look at an image like this, it reminds me of home. It reminds me of the sanctuary that I left behind to get the training here. And ultimately, New York City, as lovely as it is, no hate, but I am a hiking enthusiast and an outdoor person at heart, and so hopefully I'll see myself going back to the Pacific Northwest at some point. But just to let you know how much I believe that this image is beautiful to me. For my 5-year anniversary, my wife actually got me a ring. It's just a signet ring, but what it has on there etched is actually the image this tree specifically put on here. This exact image was put onto this ring by an expert jeweler, and it's something that means so much to me, and I wear this ring very regularly. More or less, when you see this, I want you to take a second, close your eyes, and think about what home means to you, what your sanctuary is, what your happy place is, and go back to that for a second. And if looking at this image does nothing but get you back to that moment for you, then I'll call it a successful image from my perspective.
Wow, thank you, Minhaz. I just am in awe by your commitment to getting those shots, and the tree really reminds me of home, and that's touching as well. I'm going to launch another poll to see if everyone was paying attention. The question is, what's the symbol on Minhaz's silver ring? A, an etched photo of his wife, B, the tree from Sanctuary, or C, the tripod he lost at Thor's well. 100% of people answered the tree from Sanctuary, so you are right. Unfortunately, we're sadly down to our last 2 guests to hear from, so hang tight because you don't want to miss these last 2 guest artists' worlds. Next up is Dorothy Adu-amankwah. Dorothy is an aspiring physician poet with a passion for global health and born and raised in the eastern region of Ghana. Her current hometown is Springfield, Virginia. With her white coat, she hopes to practice healing on both individual and systemic levels through the avenues of medicine and poetry. Let's hear from Dorothy.
Hi, my name is Dorothy Adu-amankwah. I am a first-year medical student, class of 2025. I identify myself as an aspiring physician poet who originates from Ghana, West Africa. I identify as an aspiring physician poet. So for me, this means that I'm learning to grow into both my identity as a healer through poetry and also as a healer in the medical space. I started writing poetry in 7th grade, and in that process of starting to write poetry, I fell in love with poetry's ability to heal and also to be able to create connection with others. And as I continued to write into high school, I also discovered performance poetry, which allowed me to create a space in which I could hold both my experiences and the experiences of others. Over the years, as I have done both written and performance poetry, what I've noticed is that poetry allows me to be able to create a space of healing and connection with others. So my portfolio of poems oftentimes navigates what it looks like to be able to be able to process healing in the face of physical or emotional suffering with others. And this particular poem, I wrote it in honor of my grandmother, who was my primary caretaker when I was young. And this poem kind of speaks to her legacy of healing that I witnessed. And as the first in my family to become a physician, I'm able to look back on this legacy, and it empowers me in my journey of wanting to become a physician. What I want the world to see in this particular piece is to be able to see both the way in which I embrace my identities as a physician, or as an aspiring physician, and also as someone who would like to explore healing through poetry. And also I would love for the world to see the legacy that my grandmother has for me. And so with that, I would like to recite this poem. Mama's Hair, a poem in honor of my grandmother. Mama's hair is silver wired strands thinned by old age. Each morning she gently caresses her crown with the lips of a wide-toothed comb, each strand free to fly in the chilly mountain air of a cropon. A grandmother with a household to rule, this queen never plays with her beauty or strength. Every child knew never to mess with mama, yet you could just as easily find yourself on her lap, or with your head heavy on her worn-out knees as she sang stories to the rhythm of the fire. Mama's words never fell without an ear to hear. I was always there to catch the fruit of her lips. I will always be here to hear her old-aged whispers. Mama practices ancient healing. With hands and herbs, she cares for the babe to the aged. On those knees I laid my head, many babes have been bathed, many scrapes and bruises bound. Mama's hair continued to thin, and my questions continued to multiply. When will I see her again? Are her memories of me fading into the dying light? As I twist and braid my own strands with love, I remember Mama's hands care for each woman in the town like her own silver-wired strands. With hands and scalpels, I may care for the babe to the aged. Many scrapes and bruises I may bind. I hope to heal like Mama. I hope to love like Mama. All the strands of patience whom I may touch. Thank you for listening.
Wow, thank you, Dorothy. I'm going to start another poll, but while people work on that, I'm actually going to say that I admire Dorothy so much. I've read her work in the Words to Live By writing workshop. It's a Nexus course here. I've also had the pleasure of listening to her read at the open mic in the fall, and she's just so amazing, and you're always transported when you listen or read Dorothy's work. So I'm glad we all got to experience that together. So the poll is, who is Mama in Dorothy's poem, Mama's Hair? Looks like the majority of you are answering her grandmother, and that is correct. So congrats to everyone who got the answer right. We've actually arrived at our last guest artist for this afternoon, James Fleming. James is a medical student who deeply values the innate storytelling found within nature. Through macro photography, he explores the aspects of nature that may otherwise slip by unnoticed. His ultimate goal is to blend a photographer's sense of wonder, appreciation, and curiosity into his practice as a thoughtful and observant physician. James, please show us your world.
My name is James Fleming. I'm in the second year med school class here, and I've been doing portrait photography professionally for 11 years, and I started shooting fine art, nature, macro photography in 2017, so not 5 years ago. So when I first started shooting macro photography, I was actually in a pretty personally challenging time. I was a year out of college, a year into starting my job as emergency department scribe, and it was time to reapply to med school. And I found myself feeling like the world was kind of just like passing me by. So it was at that time that I decided to kind of depart from all things science, if you will, and explore my interests in nature, macro photography, follow my heart, because that's what my heart wanted at the time. And I'm so glad that I did that. I inadvertently discovered one of my greatest passions, and that is appreciating the little details in life as it pertains to nature, but also as it pertains to human beings and the human experience itself. I grew up in the woods in Minnesota. I would always be like on my hands and knees looking at bugs and rocks and mushrooms and of course leaf veins. The lessons that I've learned doing nature macro photography, and I guess just in general doing photography, is drawing a parallel between how these things in nature that are happening all the time. It's like if you look at something on the small scale and then you look at something from the 30,000 foot view, they're kind of similar in a lot of ways. Like if you look at this photo, for example, if you think hard enough about it, you can imagine like these are roadways in a city, or these are veins or nerves in the body. And a lot of that wonder and curiosity has eked its way into my experience in med school. So yeah, nature macro photography in my life has brought me to ask myself the critical questions like, do I really understand what's going on here? Do I understand all the components and the processes that have to happen to make this exist? And then perhaps most importantly, and the thing that I carry with me almost every day is, shouldn't I just take a step back and appreciate beauty for what it is? I guess what I would hope that my photography has, like the impact that it has on other people, is this effect of slowing down and just taking a deep breath and looking at something maybe in kind of like, I know this might sound a little lofty, but looking at something in kind of a meditative state, looking at it for what it is and appreciating those details. So I just want to say thanks for taking the time to hear about my work, and I hope you leave today with a similar sense of wonder, appreciation, and curiosity.
Wow, thank you, James. I feel like we always need that reminder to follow your heart and to be curious about things in our backyard, and this is just a wonderful reminder of that, so thank you so much. I'm going to launch one last poll to test your knowledge. The question is, what does James want viewers to remember when seeing his work? A, how leaves look like veins. B, how to breathe and remember the small details. C, how to look at different perspectives. For those of you who answered B, how to breathe and remember the small details, you are correct. If we can all take a collective deep breath right now. I definitely know I needed that. So for anyone else who needed that, I'm glad we could share that together. And actually, with that deep breath, it brings us to the end of the Annenberg Art Gala, Between the World and Me. We were so glad that you could join us. This afternoon was about being present to worlds beyond our own and understanding the interplay of arts and medicine. Icahn Mount Sinai has many opportunities for you to stay connected to art, medicine, and the humanities. Some of them are listed on the slide that you see here. As mentioned, Dr. Coller co-teaches the course, The Pulse of Art, Connections Between the History of Art and the History of Medicine. It is open to students, faculty, and staff at the Icahn Mount Sinai. And so if you are interested in joining, please email her directly and check out the Pulse of Art website for more information. You can see the website on the screen here. Second, the Academy for Medicine and the Humanities, one of today's co-sponsors, hosts an hour-long open house every Thursday beginning at 12:15. So feel free to join the session to learn more about the program. And please look out for emails from MedEd events with more details about this, along with emails about the Richmond and Udell series on humanism and ethics in medicine. Third, as mentioned at the outset, I, along with a few other artists in the Zoom, are editors and contributors to The Apothecary, a digital creative arts magazine that's student-run and based at Mount Sinai. We will be releasing issue 5 in May. And lastly, we want you to stay connected with the art you saw today and the entire Between the World and Me collection. We are actually sharing a complete virtual exhibit in the chat, and if you are on campus, we also definitely encourage you to check out the art on Annenberg 12 and 13 in Aaron Hall. So with that, I want to thank you so much for joining us this afternoon, and we hope to see you again soon.